Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our CKLA Knowledge Domain 5. We're on Lesson 4. We're learning about the War of 1812. And in this lesson, the title is Another War Already. Your objective, students, listen carefully so that you can explain the importance of the waterways in the War of 1812. We're also going to be listening for the word economy, so that we can explain what we know about the word economy. All right, let's get ready. What started the War of 1812? Adele asked her grandfather. Did we have a big army and navy back then? JP asked, almost at the same time as his sister. Well, replied Grandfather Lafitte, the answers to both of those questions are related. To answer your question first, JP, we did not have a large army or navy back then. We had a fairly small navy and only about 4,000 soldiers. Just so you know, today's army has almost 500,000 soldiers, and there are more than 200,000 sailors in the Navy today. You'll notice the Army is on the right and the Navy is on the left. The Navy and the Army. To fight a war and have any chance of winning, the president had to find more soldiers pretty quickly. Remember, in 1812, many Americans were farmers. They used guns to hunt and to protect their homes. President Madison now asked farmers to use their guns to fight for their country. He offered them money and land if they would join. Did they? Asked Adele. Although some people were against the war, explained Grandfather Lafitte, many men were eager to join. These soldiers didn't always get the best military training, though. That is why in the beginning of the war, things did not go so well for us. Our government and military leaders were counting on the fact that the British were so busy fighting the French that they would not be able to put up much of a fight against us. They hoped that the British would not have a large enough army. In fact, some people expected the British to give up almost immediately. As it turned out, none of these assumptions were right. Now remember, an assumption is something that is believed to be true, but is not known to be true. Some assumptions turn out to be true, but others do not. Take a look at this map here. The British did not back down. As the weeks and months went on, they came up with a three-part plan to attack us. First, they would launch an attack from British territory in Canada, up here in Canada, and move their army into New York State. Then they would attack our coastal cities, including Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. Finally, they would try to capture New Orleans and gain control of the Mississippi River. All the way down there. Look at that. Wow. Now, just think for a minute. As I describe a part of the British plan of attack, we're going to point to the area on the map, on this image. You can point with your eyes, okay? Just notice. The British wanted to attack our coastal cities, including Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I hope you're looking right here. The British wanted to launch an attack from Canada and move into New York State. I hope you're looking up top right here. Here's Canada, and here's New York State over here. The British wanted to capture New Orleans and gain control of the Mississippi River. You'll notice all the way down here, here's New Orleans. This is the state of Louisiana, as we know it today. And this is the Mississippi River, this line right here. That is a symbol for the Mississippi River. So think, in what order did the British plan to take these actions? Well, think for a minute. Remind yourself, they planned first to launch an attack from Canada to New York State, then to attack the coastal cities such as Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. The coastal cities are right on the coast here, right by the water. And finally, to capture New Orleans and gain control of the Mississippi River. All right, now back to the story. Where did the first battles take place? Asked JP, curious to learn more. We thought that our best chance was to attack the British in Canada, continued Grandfather Lafitte. About 3 weeks after the start of the war, an American general led a small army of militiamen into Canada. Militiamen are men who were trained to be soldiers, but who were not part of the army. Unfortunately, they were defeated and were forced to surrender to the British. Remember, surrender means to give up, allowing the other side to win. Other defeats in the Great Lakes area resulted in the loss of territory north and west of Ohio to the British. This meant that settlers in neighboring Indiana were now vulnerable or exposed to danger or harm. And as had already been suspected, some Native Americans took up weapons to fight alongside the British. They thought that this might be the only way they could protect their land. Because of this war, Native Americans suffered greatly. Did we fight at sea as well? Asked JP. I was wondering that too, said Adele. We certainly did. That was when we had some important victories. Where did the first battles take place? Asked JP, curious to learn more. We thought that our best chance was to attack the British in Canada, continued Grandfather Lafitte. About 3 weeks after the start of the war, an American general led a small army of militiamen into Canada, right up here. Militiamen are men who were trained to be soldiers, but who were not part of the army. Unfortunately, they were defeated and were forced to surrender or give up to the British. Other defeats in the Great Lakes area, right up in here, these are the Great Lakes. Other defeats in the Great Lakes area resulted in the loss of territory north and west of Ohio to the British, all around in this area. This also meant that settlers in neighboring Indiana were now vulnerable. Vulnerable means exposed to danger or harm. And as had already been suspected, some Native Americans took up weapons to fight alongside the British. They thought that this might be the only way they could protect their land. Because of this war, Native Americans suffered greatly. Did we fight at sea as well? Asked JP. I was wondering that too, said Adele. We certainly did. That was where we had some important victories, replied Grandfather Lafitte. You mentioned the USS Constitution on your list. That ship was also known back then as Old Ironsides. In the very beginning of the war, this incredible ship defeated a British ship off the coast of Canada. Both ships fought a hard battle. At one point, the two ships were right next to each other. Cannonballs from the USS Constitution smashed into the sides of the British ship. They caused a lot of damage, and even though the British ship fired back, they did much less damage to our ship. It's said that some of the cannonballs even bounced off the side of the Constitution because its walls were so thick. Is that how it got its name? Asked Adele. Yes, thanks to Old Ironsides, the British were forced to surrender. It is probably safe to say that at least in the early stages of the war, we were much more successful at sea than we were on land. Hooray! Cheered JP and Adele together. The British were determined to ruin the U.S. trading economy and prevent us from getting supplies we needed. Remember, the economy refers to the system in which people buy, sell, or trade items or their services. So they blockaded most of the U.S. coastline. They blockaded the coastline. Luckily, we knew our waterways much better than the British did. Now, waterways are the canals and rivers in which boats can travel. We even had privateers who were able to stop many British merchant or trading ships and take their cargo. Privateers are sailors on private ships that are hired to attack and rob other ships. privateers. Oh, is this the part when you tell us about the pirates? Asked JP eagerly. Not quite, chuckled Grandfather Lafitte. Many of the privateers in the War of 1812 were hired by the United States government. However, it's true, some of these privateers had previously been pirates. There is one privateer in particular that I'm going to tell you about later, but we haven't quite gotten to that part of the story. Did the Americans think we would win the War of 1812? Asked Adele. We weren't sure, but we were determined not to give up, explained Grandfather Lafitte. The next year, we sent our army back into Canada. We took back the town we had lost so that we could protect our territories again. This gave us hope. We had another victory later that year when our Navy defeated an entire fleet of British ships on Lake Erie. A fleet is a group of military ships run by the same leader. Was that when we knew we would win? Asked JP. No, we were never completely sure that we could win, replied Grandfather. You see, by 1814, the end of the Napoleonic Wars was in sight. That meant that the British would have more soldiers and naval ships available to spare. Now that they weren't busy fighting with France, they could turn their full attention toward the war with the United States. Of course, they were still keeping many foreign ships from entering U.S. ports, Grandfather added. To make matters worse, they knew the United States was almost out of money. Did the British think we would surrender? Asked JP. Oh, they probably did, replied Grandfather thoughtfully. What happened next? Adele wanted to know. Before I explain, we need to go down to the barn and take care of the horses. Okay, exclaimed the children as they jumped up out of their chairs and off the porch. Adele grabbed her grandfather's hand, and the three walked together to the barn. Grandfather still held the mysterious leather journal tightly in his hand.